condition, but he just stood there and he says, "I just want to thank you." And man, just tears just rolled down my face. You know, it's just amazing. So we can make a difference in people's lives. And while I was at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine, this was particularly my graduate school, as I continued to learn more and more about crime, the relationship between nutrition, crime, and other physical disorders that influence deviant behavior. I came across all these amazing papers that are just buried in research libraries everywhere. Here's one in 1936 where it states 15 years ago it would have been preposterous to assume that there could be any relationship between sugar metabolism and crime. That's 1936, and we're still fighting that battle today. Well, after Albuquerque and New York and the rubble of Hamburg, Germany, I decided I really got to get away from all of this. And so there was an offer as a state assistant administrator for the Department of Social Services in the state of South Dakota. And I said, I'm going, you know, because not only did I have to deal with a high crime rate, but if you look at the areas that say northwest, north central, and central, all that area, and a little part of the southwest, that was my jurisdiction. So I also saw what was happening to the native population with the foods of commerce. It was devastating. It was worse when I went to Gallup, which was part of my jurisdiction in the 2nd Judicial District, and it was just the point at which I said, I've got to get out of here. And I had my master's degree, and I said, you know, enough of this, because we were working with a lot of criminals like this. And eventually out of the department, again, $4,900. We had the highest caseload in the United States. We had 13,100 criminals to deal with per year. There were 8 officers to prepare all those reports. It was awful. And by the time I finished 4 years later, leaving the department, becoming a criminal justice planner with the federal government, my salary was still at $5,700. And I'll tell you, that Pepsi International job offer looked pretty attractive when you try to figure out how you pay your rent, food, own a car, and things of that nature, and $5,700. There were other reports, and this is just a quick history. In 1974, DeSaro in Morristown, New Jersey, did a study on adult incarcerated offenders, and they started to show that in an 8-week period, using diet and dietary supplements, you could cause a very significant improvement in their behavior and their rates of antisocial behavior, and even in terms of self-perception. This was the program that they used. I put this into the work, Orthomolecular Treatment of Criminal Offenders, which you might recall I wrote in 1978, and it describes the actual program that they used. So this finally led me to move to South Dakota. This is a nice road map of the state, and in the center of it is Pierre, which is the state capital, the only capital in the United States that does not have an interstate going through it. And this was another major turning point in my life, and this is where I think my convictions became very strong. And this was one day when I had to visit all of these facilities around the state. I was hiring a lot of youth service program officials for the state, and our goal was to deinstitutionalize the state's correctional system and become the first state in the United States that actually would require no prisons for offenders. And we were almost there doing this, and the people that helped us were foster parents and group homes and residential treatment facilities that were non-incarcerative in nature. We treated the parents as we treated the children, and I think this was an important part of the program. But in Huron, South Dakota, which is east, about 100 miles from Pierre, South Dakota, I saw something very remarkable. I saw house parents that used nutrition as a way of changing these children's behavior. It was so impressive that when we went back to look at how much money we were saving on every child going to this facility compared to any other facility in the state, I knew that we were really onto something. This was a story that had to be told nationwide. And at the same time, Barbara Reed, who is, I'm very delighted, is here today, and I've missed not seeing her and talking to her for many, many years. Barbara was also experiencing the same thing in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, not far from Cleveland, Ohio. And because you might recall that George McGovern was the senator from South Dakota, the state I was working in at the time, Barbara had the opportunity to testify before the United States Senate Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs on her experience in treating 318 offenders with diet and supplements. And she stated of these 252 required attention as to their diet and vitamin needs. And then she pointed out that we have had not one single person back in court for trouble who has maintained and stayed on the nutritional diet. In concluding her remarks, she stated, quote, "Never before has the court had such a tool for working with the many ill people who find themselves in court." So Barbara also had an influence on me, because it wasn't too much later that I got a call from the chief juvenile judge in Denver, Colorado, who said, "Alex, there's a chief probation officer's job opened up in Pierce County, Washington. I would encourage you to apply for it." And I said, "Well, gee, I'm just 28 years old. The chief is usually 40, 45, 50 years old." And he said, "No, I think you'd have a good chance. You've gotten a lot of training from the Department of Justice. You've traveled around the country. A lot of people know you, and you might have it." So anyway, I applied, thinking I would not have a chance at all. So did 60 other people who I felt were far better qualified than myself. And I was asked I was one of the finalists, so they flew me into Tacoma, Washington. I was interviewed by 27 judges and the court administrator, and a month later they said, "You got the job." And I go, "Oh my God, 28 years old, I'm a chief probation officer. I can retire when I'm 42, that type of thing." So what I didn't know is very corrupt county. And within a year, to make a story I can't really tell you too much about, we had the county sheriff and 24 other officials in federal penitentiary for things like arson, attempted murder, and it's just an incredible mess that I found myself working in. But anyway, it cleaned up the county. Today it's a phenomenal place. It has 7 museums, an entirely different form of government. Corruption is gone, and it's a great place to live. If you're, again, geography lessons for those of you from other parts of the country or the world and are not familiar with it, this is Washington State divided into counties, and you can see the one county, that's Pierce County. And what's interesting about Pierce County, on one end is it's got ocean water, and on the other end, going east, is Mount Rainier, and that's 14,410 feet tall, has over 30 glaciers, and it's always active. It's supposed to explode here sometime soon, and we hope it doesn't occur. That's where we worked. It's in the state building there. Well, anyway, now that I was in that particular situation, oh, by the way, let me see if I can go back here for a moment. If I could just go back, just in case I still included that map. Do you know what's interesting about this map? I just took this off the internet. You can see Friday, April 30th at 4 p.m. Do you see that there's a little seismic activity occurring around Mount Rainier right now? This is why it's good to be in Vancouver, British Columbia right now. Okay, I just want you to all relax. We're too far away from Mount Rainier for us to worry for right now. Okay, thank you. I just needed to have that reassurance. Dr. Linus Pauling was also a very influential person in my life. An incredible man. I mean, you just look at him and he just emanates peace. What a brilliant man. And I miss him, and I think all of us who had a chance to know him miss him as well. A unique individual, as we say, in a mensch of the greatest proportions. And he stated that orthomolecular medicine is the achievement and preservation of good mental health by provision of the optimum molecular environment for the mind, especially the optimum concentration of substances normally present in the human body. Now, that's what I learned from him when I was chief probation officer, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to put this to the scientific test. I think that's what we really need to do. So what I next decided to do, starting in 1977, was to start some quasi-experimental studies on criminal offenders and delinquents beginning in Washington State. And the first was the Pierce County Adult Probation Department, because guess what? I was the boss. So I could decide that we were going to do this study.